to monetize it. Like,
sorry. It's good. No, I'm going to be moisturized. I'm going to be good.
Okay. Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Everyone's eaten. Feels like they're going to go to sleep soon. My job is to try to make you all fall asleep comfortably. If you need candy, let me know. Okay, so we're doing lecture 2, talk 2, whatever you want to call it. I'm always going to begin with this. I do not think that I speak as one who teaches, but as one whose words condemn himself. We are going to talk about, what did we talk about last time? Loving or reconciling with self. Today right now we're going to talk about reconciling with others. So as we talked about, there's kind of these 3, and we're going to talk about reconciling with others. So, being human means we will hurt others and be hurt by others. That's just human life. It all happens, and it's just a fact that we have to live with. Whether you intended or not, or whether someone else intended it or not, you're going to feel hurt and you're going to hurt others. There's 3 principles that help us get over hurt. Okay? Forgiveness, reconciliation, and healing. So I'm going to pause there. I'm going to ask you to tell me what your explanation is for what these 3 mean. How are they different? Or are they similar? Or the same? Forgiveness, reconciliation, and healing. Yes?
They're different, but they're all intertwined together.
Fair point. Agree. How are they different?
I feel like they build off of each other.
Yes. Agree. That's great for after eating. I'm going to keep going. This is perfect. No, that's really good. Seriously. I'm going to put my clock out here. Dora, give me a time that I should stop.
50 minutes, 45.
Okay, so 8:30? Okay. You guys are like, 8:30. There's candy if you need to stay up. There's candy in the back. Okay. So forgiveness is a debt no longer owed. And you heard Abuna give the sermon today talking about that parable of the debt. Okay? So forgiveness, let's say I say something to Dura that he's not happy with. Okay? And it was an insult or something. Forgiveness in that situation for him would be, let's say, what wouldn't forgiveness be? It would be him feeling like John owes me an apology. Forgiveness would be if he were to say in his heart, and he actually felt it, I no longer need an apology. Reconciliation, and so forgiveness in that case, it's unconditional. It's not waiting for someone else to act. Reconciliation, though, is restoring a relationship as it was before or making it better. This is different because it is conditional. It requires 2 people to participate. So forgiveness you can do on your own. Reconciliation requires 2 people to participate. But not everyone in your life, even if you've forgiven them, will be reconciled with you. It's just not going to happen because it requires 2 people. Healing, after you've forgiven, you've made your attempts at reconciliation. Healing is something that happens with time and it's something you ask God for. It doesn't necessarily happen just based on your own actions or based on something you can do. An example would be, let's say, first of all, another person cannot heal you. healings with time and by God, who's the true physician, helping you through it. I'll tell you, if let's say you get robbed at gunpoint. If you get robbed at gunpoint, you might forgive the people who robbed you. You're probably not going to reach out to them for reconciliation because they probably don't care to talk to you. Healing is, after much time, you get over the trauma of what happened. And God can provide that solace. So that's just a little bit about it. Going into differences between forgiveness and reconciliation, I want to hone in on that. So like I said, forgiveness is tearing up or extinguishing the debt someone owes you. So if you think in your life right now, someone who's done something wrong to you, and imagining, maybe you have someone that you're upset with today. Again, forgiveness is giving up that debt. It depends on one party versus two parties. It's a willful act. Reconciliation also is the same. And it's unconditional versus conditional. Now, we're going to talk about a few things about forgiveness. We're going to spend a lot of time on forgiveness. Like healing God gives. Forgiveness is something you can do, so let's focus on what you can do. First thing is, there are conditions to receiving God's forgiveness. What do you guys think of that comment? I'm seeing heads nodding. Anybody disagree with that? Conditions to God's forgiveness. Everyone seems to agree. Okay, no one's saying no. Good. Let me put, let's see if this...
Okay, Sham's not here.
It's busy.
اللي بعديها ونحن نطلب المغفرة نطلبها كل يوم في الصلاة الربانية ونقول اغفر لنا كما نغفر نحن أيضا وعشان ربنا يغفر في شروط للمغفرة في شروط للمغفرة منها التوبة ومنها المغفرة للمسيئين ومنها الصلح مع الناس.
So just a quick sound bite.
اللي بعديها ونحن نطلب المغفرة نطلبها كل يوم في الصلاة الربانية ونقول اغفر لنا كما نغفر نحن أيضا وعشان ربنا يغفر.
Sorry, same one. Different. Not bad. No one caught that.
I thought you were just wanting us to hear.
I know.
السيد المسيح لما قال لنا الصلاة الربانية أبانا الذي لم يعلق على شيء منها سوى أمر واحد إن غفرتم للناس زلتهم يغفر لكم أبوكم السماوي زلتكم وإن لم تغفروا للناس زلتهم لا يغفر لكم أبوكم السماوي زلتكم. يبقى حكاية المغفرة للآخرين دي شرط اتكلم عليه الآباء والإنجيليين فموجود في متى 6:14 وفي مرقس 11:26 وفي لوقا 16:37 و38 في كل الأناجيل. عايز ربنا يغفر لك اغفر لغيرك.
So, isn't it nice to see Pope Shenouda? Who doesn't miss Pope Shenouda? Okay. You miss him? You have a question? Or just saying you miss him? Oh, I miss him. So cute. Okay. All right. Thinking about what he said, he's saying something we all know, but it's great to hear from Pope Shenouda. Often our first reaction to the concept of forgiveness is making excuses why we shouldn't have to. That's often our first reaction. And we go, oh, well, they keep hurting me. It hurt too much. I'm too angry. I'll forgive after they change. I'll forgive after they apologize. We all have these fleeting moments. You may know some people that maybe struggle with it more. Maybe you struggle with it. There's always these conditions. But when we think about what has been asked of us, there is no condition. It is unconditional. We are to forgive. As Abuna said, 60 million dinar, which is a person's daily average of work, compared to us forgiving, what, $100? It's nothing. When you think about forgiveness, it's really an act of love. And when you look at, it's not dependent on receiving. It's an outward action. And when you look at the definition of love, it's very outward facing. So 1 Corinthians 13. Suffers long, is kind, does not envy, does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, bears some things? No, bears all things. Endures some things? No, endures all things. It is limitless. It is limitless. You don't see any of the verse saying, you should love because someone is kind, or because they are considerate, or because they are not selfish, or because they do not behave rudely, or because they do not provoke, and they're patient, and they make me happy. That's not in the Bible. It's not in the Bible. I'll tell you a story of St. John the Short. He had his spiritual leader or elder was trying to teach him some lessons. So he's a monk, and his spiritual elder in the monastery, they were living in the same, I won't say cell, but yeah, they're living in the same living space. And the elder wanted to teach him obedience and how to suffer long. So in training St. John the Short, the elder did this. He would have St. John the Short, he would be in his cell, and the elder would go to church, and he told St. John the Short to stay. And every day that the elder would go to church, he would smack St. John the Short and then go to church. Now St. John, any human person, and again, he doesn't know he's being trained. Any human person would be like, first of all, you're a hypocrite, right? That's what we would do. We'd go, you're a hypocrite. How dare you? I'm not going to stay here if this is the way you're going to be. I mean, there's all kinds of emotions that we might all have. So after doing this for, I think, 7 days, the 7th day, the elder saw angels putting 7 crowns on St. John the Short's head, all for obediently accepting what was kind of unfair treatment. But because he took it with a genuine heart of absolute love and was bearing with it. Let me give you another clip from the beloved Pope Shenouda.
وربنا يقول في المغفرة دي بالكيل الذي تكيلون به يكال لكم إن كنت تكيل للناس بالطيبة ربنا يعاملك بالطيبة بالقسوة يبقى تحتاج لنفس الكيل وبعدين ربنا ادانا في مادة 18 مثل للمديونين واحد مديون ب10,000 وزنة. شوف الوزنة فيها قد ايه. وراح للسيد وقال له أنا مش قادر وتعبان وأرجوك تعفيني. فسامحه في 10,000 وزن. وهو خارج لقى واحد كان مديون ليه ب100 دينار. قال له فين ال100 دينار؟ قال له ما عنديش. خذه ورمى في السجن. فالناس جم حكوا للسيد فنداه له قال له تعالى أيها العبد الشرير، بقى أنا نجيتك من الدين الكبير ده كله وأنت مش قادر تسامح أخوك في حاجة بسيطة، ورماه للمعذبين. هكذا أنت ربنا غفر لك الكثير 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 من أمس ومن قبل أمس وفي الماضي الطويل، وأنت تيجي على أخوك اللي يسيء إليك إساءة لا تقارن إطلاقا بخطاياك، وتعمل عليه الليلة وتقول ما سامحوش، تبقى عملت زي العبد الشرير ده.
So when you think about this, every single day we pray, Our Father. Every single time you pray the Lord's Prayer, you are telling God, forgive me by the same measure I'm forgiving others. Every single time. You are saying, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive others. And if you're not good at forgiving others, you are setting yourself up for not being forgiven. Just think about the weight of that prayer. We say it so quickly, we say it very, kind of just pass it through. But it is a very, very deep, deep weight with a lot of measure that's held against you. Now, I want to talk about reconciliation. When we talk about reconciliation, there are 4 common reactions. You might get angry and take it out on people covertly or passively. You might withdraw and expect the other person to know and come to you. You might retaliate with gossip and venting, or you might overcompensate and pretend as if nothing happened. But eventually you explode. One of the things that I often heard growing up was this concept of khud ha'ak. Have you heard this before growing up? Khud ha'ak. Ha'i. I have a right to it. Right? I mean, it's something that you would hear commonly. But I want to tell you that concept of my right and taking my rights is unfortunately overly extended beyond what I think is biblical. There's an extent that it makes sense, but there's an extent that is not biblical. Let's just talk about the biblical standard, okay? If anyone wants to sue you and take away your tunic, let him have your cloak also. It's your tunic. It's yours. The Bible says, let him have your cloak also. For him who takes away your cloak, do not withhold your tunic either. In 1 Corinthians 6, St. Paul says, it is already an utter failure, and people like me who are lawyers will have to, get out of a job because of this. But anyways, it is already an utter failure for you that you go to law against one another. Why do you not rather accept wrong? Why do you not rather let yourselves be cheated? I don't know how many times you grow up and you hear someone say that to you. I don't know if your parents or friends go, it's okay, be cheated. What's wrong? We probably hear the opposite, which is, khud ha'ak. And then St. Peter says, this is commendable if because of conscience toward God, one endures grief, suffering, rightfully? No, suffering wrongfully. There's reward for that. There's a gift for that. Now there's 4 biblical principles regarding reconciliation. First, you need to respond as soon as possible. Okay, we don't want to pretend like there isn't something to deal with. So you want to respond and be honest and transparent. As it says in Ephesians, put away lying. Don't pretend as if nothing's happened. And as we know, it says in Ephesians, let us speak truth to your neighbor because we're members of one another. So it's okay to have that conversation. There's nothing wrong with telling someone you were hurt. Now, if you're telling them because they owe you an apology, you've already missed the point. But you're telling them because you want to resolve future conflict or manage reconciliatory efforts. But you've already forgiven. So if I'm like, Dora, just let you know, when you say this thing in this way, it hurts me. If I'm going to him going, in my heart, you owe me an apology, and I don't like what you said to me. That's different than, you don't owe me anything. I'm just letting you know when you say it, it hurts me. And if he goes, does you go, that's okay. That's the Christian reaction in your heart, and it's okay that you've had the conversation. Do not let the sun go down in your wrath, nor give place to the devil. So the idea is, when there's an attempt to restore the relationship, you should do it as soon as you can. So if there's something broken, try to restore it as soon as you can.
شروط المغفرة إنها تكون من قلبك وتكون بسرعة وبدون إبطاء وبدون تخزين ومهما كانت الإساءة. الإبطاء في المغفرة يدل على أن الذات موجودة، ذاتي وكرامتي وسمعتي، ويطلع مين ده اللي يهني. والغضب، الغضب يعني ايه؟ يعني الخطية بتبدأ في الأول في إساءة، وبعدين الواحد يزعل، وبعدين يغضب، وبعدين يطول الغضب، وبعدين يتحول إلى حقد، وبعدين يتحول إلى كراهية أو بغضة، وبعدين مش بس كده، كما يغضب على هذا الشخص ويكرهه، عايز الناس كلهم يكرهوه كمان. يقول لده والدي خلي بالكم من فلان وفلان الجنس وناطوا ده، ويقول لدي وده وانت خلي بالكم فلان، ويلا وهات يزن في ودان الناس لغاية ما يخلي كل الناس يكرهوا الشخص ده. وبعدين كده نقول احنا مسيحيين، مسيحيين عشان ايه؟ عشان بنعلق صليب على صدرنا وبندقه على دراعنا. مسيحية حياة مش ألفاظ. والكتاب بيقول لا تجازوا عن شر بشر ولا تنتقموا لأنفسكم أيها الأحباء.
What do you guys think when you hear that? Hard standard, right standard, difficult to apply? Thoughts?
Difficult to apply.
Difficult to apply, right? It's very hard to apply. The thing is, we often grow up, remember we talked in the first one, we talked about, we often lie to ourselves, deceive ourselves. Unfortunately, we often grow up making excuses for why we don't have to forgive or reconcile. The other thing you need to think about reconciliation, we talked about it briefly earlier, which is it takes precedent over taking communion and attending the divine liturgy. Some people, have you heard of the idea that a person will intentionally stand far from a person they're not reconciled with, that they're upset with in church, so they don't have to greet one another. Have you heard this before? Have you heard anyone say this before? I've had people tell me before that, and they thought this was conceptually okay, that they need to stand far away from the person, that so that when the reconciliation prayer happens, they don't have to greet one another. And then they go on and take communion like nothing happened. First, there are two problems with that. One, just because you're not next to the person and then you decide to take communion makes no sense. Two, it's not just about who's next to you in proximity. Anyone in the entire world that you have an issue with and you're not reconciled with, obviously you have to be reconciled with before you go take communion or attend a divine liturgy. Again, as long as you've done your part, not everyone's going to respond to your attempt. So the first step is you've forgiven, you've released them from a debt. Second step is you've reached out. Okay? You're not reaching out going, here, pay my debt. You said you're reaching out with an empty hand, hoping they'll hold your hand too. And if they don't, that's okay. And when they don't, you're not upset. You're not upset with them because they didn't reconcile. You've done your part. And you know the verse about if you bring your gift to the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave it there, first be reconciled. We also know another verse here. Whenever you stand praying, if you have anything against anyone, forgive him, that your Father in heaven will also forgive you your trespasses. The third thing, you should take the initiative to reconcile no matter who started it. A lot of people will say, well, I didn't hurt the person. A lot of people will say, I didn't hurt the person. They're the one who hurt me. Why should I go say anything to them? That's a very common thing people will do. Have you guys ever heard that before? Maybe felt it. You don't have to tell me if you felt it. But where you're just like, it's not my fault. They're the ones who hurt me. Again, that's holding a debt. That's holding a debt. So no matter who started it, you want to make sure that you are prompting an effort to reconcile. And as you know in Matthew, wherever if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault. It doesn't say, if your brother sins against you, wait for them to tell you. No, go and tell them that person's fault. And if he hears you've gained your brother, you've been able to reconcile. The world standards, like we said, is to have the person who did the wrong initiate. But that's not Christ's standard. And as we said, you need to really try as hard, if it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. Reconciliation, like I said, is a joint effort between two persons. The key is you've done 100% of your part. And remember, when you're thinking about how difficult it is, who initiated reconciliation with us? God did. He didn't wait for us. He had been planning it all the time. Now, here's one thing I want to mention, is when it's difficult is when it counts the most. I really love this verse, and I think I remember it from The Passion of the Christ. I think it's like one of the scenes where he's just preaching and he says, if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? You guys ever heard this verse before? Yeah? If you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Like, you don't get credit because it's easy. You get credit when it's difficult. And the more difficult, the more the credit. The more the reward. The more God knows you deserve to be compensated. I really love this sermon that Pope Shenouda gave about this subject. He goes, and so just translate it in English for me. He goes, imagine someone shows you respect every day. Will that reveal anything about you? No. You're not going to gain anything from it. But what if God sends someone to you who says a few difficult words or does something to you that is difficult to bear, and then you respond with anger? What will that reveal? It's going to reveal you have a sickness because you responded with anger. And what you should say is not, I'm mad at you. What you should say is, thank you very much for revealing to me the illness I have. you don't get upset with the person and turn on the person. You tell them thank you. He says, trust me, at times in the world, there are people who may have the virtue of patience. You talk to them, whatever you want, and they don't get upset, and their heart is spacious. And I want you to focus on this idea, the heart being spacious. If you get a little mud and you put it into water, you make the water muddy. But if you put that mud, so if you put it like in a little cup, you make that little cup muddy. But if you take that same mud, same exact mud, same amount, and you put it into a big river or a big lake, what happens? Does it make it muddy? No, has no effect. The same mud. The only difference is how spacious that mud is landing in. And it's because it's wide and spacious. Sometimes we are narrow inside our hearts, so we sometimes get upset with people because of worldly honor and other worldly reasons. It says when a doctor puts you under an x-ray and he looks and says, you have so-and-so wrong thing with you, you need to have it addressed. Do you go and start cursing out the doctor? How dare you tell me I have this or that disease? No. You're like, thank you. There was a monk, he says, who one day went to the abbot of the monastery and told him, send me out of this monastery. I want to go to another monastery. The abbot asked, why? What is upsetting you? The monk goes, I'm not upset about anything. It's just that all the monks in this desert, in this monastery, are saints. And I want to practice Christ's commandments. So I need to go to a place where I will be cursed, and I bear it. They treat me badly, and I take it with patience. And that way I'll benefit. But I can't find anyone here to test me. Think about that. Think about that. Think about that standard. So he says, if God sends someone to test you, what will you do to him? Lift him up and slam him on the ground. God wants to give you the virtue of tolerance or patience or humility. You want him to send someone who comes to you every day and says, pray for me, and send someone else who tells you we are living by your blessings? So when God sends you someone who is troubling you so you can gain virtue, do you get upset with him? You're refusing God's will. And he kind of goes on and just... Now, I want to share with you this. Has anybody been to Venice? Who's been to Venice? Raise your hand. Wow, everybody who's been to Venice. 1, 2, raise your hand. No? Oh. 3. Wow, more than half the people in the room have been to Venice? Wow, that's
very privileged.
Very privileged. Oh my goodness. Was this a church trip? All individually in different ways. Okay. Did anyone go to this church? Santa Maria something Formosa? Most people miss it. Most people don't go there because it's kind of just there. Can you tell me who this is? Take a look at the picture and try. Here, what's that? Santa who? Maria?
The name of the church.
No, yeah, it's good. It's a good. Yeah, it's smart, deducing. That's good. Wrong, but yes, it's great. It's not. Who is this? Look at the picture and think of it. What's that? Marina. Marina the what? The ascetic, the monk. Do you remember the story? Remember the story? She pretended she was a man. So she joined the monastery, and Marina was an acceptable, I guess, male name. And so for anyone named Marina, sorry. But anyways, acceptable male name. And what ended up happening is, what did she endure?
Oh, is it the one that they said you impregnated someone?
That's right. That's right.
Never.
That's right.
Impossible.
That's impossible. Exactly. So what happens is there's like an inn nearby, and there was a soldier, and the daughter of this prominent person, like in the city, the soldier and this prominent daughter ended up, whatever happened, and she got pregnant. And the father is like, who did that? And so she thought it would be good to point out one of the monks. Because who's going to get upset with her when a monk or not? So she's like, Marina, what could Saint Marina have done? Revealed herself. She could be like, that's physically impossible, okay? It just doesn't happen like that. We don't have the science for it today. That's what she could have done. What'd she do? Accepted. She was suffering wrongfully, enduring grief, doing all those things we said feels too hard to do. And then what happened, if you notice right here, so she ended up not only accepting it, she also took the son who was given to her by the mother. I don't know how that woman did that, but anyways, gave them the son, and she raised him. He eventually also became a monk. She raised him. And so this is her raising, this is the image that you have. Now, if you notice in the picture, this here is an actual, underneath this icon, okay, is her body. Okay? This is her body, and you'll see it says Corpus Saint Marina. Okay? But you might notice something that is happening here.
She's wearing sandals.
Well, she is wearing sandals, yes.
Are there holes there?
What's that? This is her skin. What I'm trying to share with you is that her body has not decayed. She's been living for she died like 1,700, 1,800 years prior to this. And her body's not decayed. That's why they have it displayed. Okay? You can even see, her hand. That's why they have little openings so you can see it. Okay? And you'll notice something kind of interesting. Do you see a word here that's familiar?
Coptoegesia.
Yeah, Coptic Egyptian. You'll notice this is one of the, because she was living in Egypt. So this, they say, is actually one of the things that she wore from then. They have it displayed here. It's just sitting in Venice, and a lot of people pass it by, have no clue. I went in, and I was like, I knew that she was there, so I go and tell the person. And usually when you go in and you want to visit, they'll ask you to, sometimes they ask for like a monetary donation or something. Anyways, I was like, I'm just here to pray. I want to see St. Marina. They were like, oh yeah, come on in. I'm like, thank you. So I go in, and it was just a really cool thing. St. Marina the Virgin. So the pitfalls, I want to kind of recap, is when we confront the heart's response and the actions that follow. Okay? What is the normal thing? People say they did you wrong, and the world says what you should do is do wrong, right back to them, or wish them wrong. Bible says, bear it. Criticized or insulted, world says, curse back. Bible says, accept it and learn. Rights or what you deserve is taken from you. The world says, I have a right to take it back. The Bible says, let them have it. If you're hurt and disappointed, the world says division and separation. And the Bible says, choose peace and forgive. I want you to think practically for a moment. One of my favorite things to think about is driving. I feel like you can learn a lot about your spiritual state based on the way you react while driving. You really can. Like, if someone cuts you off, I've had the pleasure of being with, I forgot there's a video there. I had the pleasure of being with Bishop Yusuf at the time, and he's driving. And when things happen, he just doesn't react. I'm like, of course he doesn't react. And then you're sometimes with others who all of a sudden, they know curse words you didn't even know existed because of the driving road rage. I'll tell you, if you have issues with driving and you get really angry, it reveals something about your heart. And what should you do when someone cuts you off? You should say, thank you. You revealed that I get angry quickly, right? And that's what we should do. And in Atlanta, let me tell you, there's another reason I don't get angry at other people driving, because I don't want to get shot. I'm just saying. Anyways, all right. Customer service, just think about it. We call up customer service like they owe us something. Like, They're human brothers and sisters in this world. We treat them, though, like it's just, like, how dare you not give me my $2 refund? You know, they go nuts on them. Asking for it and being kind about it is fine. And then I'm ending with this. St. John Chrysostom, he says something kind here. He says, follow peace with all men and holiness. Therefore, with the evil, he's saying, he's kind of quoting what his message of the Bible is. So he says, follow peace with all men and holiness, he says. Therefore, with the evildoers as well, if it be possible, he says, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. In whatever you are ill-treated, bear it nobly. For the bearing with evil is a great weapon in trials. Thus Christ also made his disciples strong by saying, behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. So when dealing with others, remember that you want to be dealt with the way that God has been dealing with you. So make sure you deal with others the same way. Any questions or comments? Yes.
So, of course, I can't disagree with the forgiveness part because, like we said, it's very clear. So, 100%, no matter what, we have to forgive people. But don't you think sometimes there are situations where we should not reach out for reconciliation because it's too damaging? Like, if someone was really that harmful to you, forgiveness is one thing and healing is another thing, and we need that from God. But I think sometimes it's not healthy to reach out.
Yeah, there are some situations, like for example, I'll go to an extreme example, an abuser. It'd be someone who physically abused you in some way. It is not healthy to go reach out. God's not going to go, oh, you didn't reconcile with this physical abuser. Like, it just doesn't make sense. So there's definitely parameters. It's probably best guided, unless it's very clear, best guided by your father confessor. But yes, I agree with you. There are definite parameters by which it doesn't make sense to do so.
Well, you even mentioned, being put, at
Yeah.
gunpoint or something.
Yeah, like
You're gonna
gunpoint.
go reach out to the guy who put
Yeah,
you at gunpoint.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, what if it's like not like that extreme? So like, if it's someone you feel like, so like you mentioned, reconciliation is like restoring the relationship as it was before or better. But what if you feel that this restoring this relationship wouldn't be the best, but it's not on the extreme of like this person is like abusing or like doing something that harmful to you? It's just like you don't feel that the relationship would be beneficial and that it does more harm than good at the end of the day.
It's a good question. I don't think reconciliation and restoring the relationship means reverting to the relationship the way it has been before. But I think it's more of you're also trying to be careful for the salvation of other people. So maybe they're holding something and they're having a hard time releasing a debt. And so you're also kind of giving them an opportunity to know that you've released them and you've given them a reason to help them release you. So I would say, again, speak to your father confessor and try to get guidance. But because we want the salvation of everyone, we want to be careful with that. And it's not that when you reconcile, you're going to be talking on the phone every day, texting. I know you don't like to text long texts. I heard you say that earlier. But and it takes you, I think, a couple days. I heard something like that. I'm just, but you're not going to be doing that on the regular. And someone can interpret for me whatever he's really thinking, because that was also happening in the group meeting. But anyways, it's an inside joke apparently that I picked up in 10 minutes. But okay, so what I'm trying to say is you're not going to be talking every single day all the time. That's not the point. But yeah, it's a good question. Good thought to think about. Yeah.
Does that mean that in that situation, reconciliation could be kind of just like closure and then, just putting everything to rest and then maybe kind of moving on? Like, we're not really going to be friends, but just having that opportunity, like you said, for releasing each other.
Yeah, I think it's for closure. And then, but the key is not to deceive ourselves. Because I know people who, like I know someone who, goes to church all the time. Very, very, very religious, very spiritual, but really struggles with this part. And they just excel in everything, but they're almost in kind of deceive themselves. It appears to me, from my perspective, I don't know, but it looks like they're making excuse to avoid, rather than, and that there's still lingering debt. And so it's possible that, and again, through your Father Confessor with prayer, you can distinguish between the two. But the key is that you're not avoidant. Again, if it's an abusive thing, something different. But really having a heart that's open wide. And again, Christ had his arms open and his side open, ready to be stabbed. He was just, and he died for everyone. So we can go pretty long length. Yeah.
So I feel like your first thing was saying, okay, does God have requirements for his forgiveness? And in my mind, I answered that as yes. He needs us to ask for forgiveness, and then he'll freely give it. So what if this person isn't asking for forgiveness, doesn't care for your forgiveness, isn't sorry? Are you still required to forgive? Because God would require you to ask for forgiveness.
So, and again, forgiveness is one way.
Mm-hmm.
And so my reading of when God said, if you don't forgive others their trespass, he doesn't say forgive those who ask for forgiveness. He says forgive, just freely forgive. And so even if the other person hasn't asked for forgiveness, we need to, because what happens is there are going to be many things for most of us when we pass away from this world that we haven't asked for forgiveness for. We maybe forgot about, maybe we saw it as a small thing, or maybe we deceived ourselves into thinking it wasn't something to be asking God forgiveness for, or whatever the case may be. What would you want to be applied there? You would want God to forgive even those things. And so when you have a heart that is really spacious, God's going to reward you and compensate, probably in terms of forgiveness, for that spacious heart. So I don't think it's not dependent on someone saying or wanting forgiveness or wanting your apology. Yeah.
Is that then like them not wanting your forgiveness or not being sorry? I guess then is you like not them being reconciled. You
Yes.
forgive them in your heart.
Yes.
So you're not going to be reconciled.
That's how I see it. So I mean, we've all seen or been or had, gone through situations where we are absolutely profusely apologetic and the other side could care less. And you've done your part and you've tried to reconcile and mend the relationship, and then all you can do after that is on your own pray and hope that they, one of the best things you could probably do is say, God, forgive him, forgive her, for he or she does not know what she's doing. As for me, God, don't count it a sin in your eyes because I've released the person. So please, God, don't let it be held against them. That would be in that situation, I think would be the prayer that I'd recommend. And yeah, I think it's reconciliation. That's what's really being impeded. Yeah.
Do you always have to try to reconcile? Oh, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, can we talk about this more in discussions? Because maybe we can talk more in discussions.
That's true. You did tell me 8:30.
Yes, sorry.
No, it's a great question. It's a great question. I hope that both of you reconcile and greet one another next to each other. Oh, good.
I think it would be good to talk about that more.
Glory be to God. Yeah, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, let's talk.
I'm sorry, Mary.
Can we talk more in groups? Because we're running pretty.
Okay, I'm gonna ask my question.
Well, then Mary Ann goes first because I already cut her off, so she goes first.
No, I just have 2 questions.
Okay.
No more questions.
Go ahead.
Spiritually jacked. Go.
Okay, what if you're, let's say you've forgiven someone, but at times you're triggered. Is that not real forgiveness? That's a good question.
That's a
Mary.
great
I like it.
question.
I like it.
We are still human.
Yeah, that was a great answer.
That doesn't discount our humanity.
Yeah, he was saying we're still human.
That's the healing part.
Yeah, that's the healing part. And then you're growing so that triggers become less. Like I said, imagine driving on a road. Every time you're cut off, you want to flick the person off. Okay? And then over time, you work on yourself. The being cut off is no longer triggering you. And now you're just saying, it's okay, Habibi, maybe you had a bad day. Okay, thank you for teaching me. So I think over time, the triggers become less. So I think it's revealing either that you haven't healed or that you still have something to grow spiritually to widen your heart. Glory be to God forever, man. Okay. Thank you. That was a good question.
So we can still discuss these things further.
Are we gonna stay in a group?
Well, we have some people that left.
Let's just do one big discussion.
Huh?
Tell them.